On the day my quarter ended, I sat in a Zoom meeting, watching my CTO cry while a smiling HR representative led another Regedience sa. At the same time, I was looking at an email I just sent. The subject was notice, and the attachment was my resignation letter, which I had CC'd to 17 of our top clients. One of them replied immediately, "Wherever you land, we'll follow." But let's back up. This isn't just a sad story about a bad boss. It's a story about a calculated plan. I had a clear goal to plant explosives under a failing company while appearing to be a loyal employee. My week started with a mistake, not a technical one, but a human one. I was accidentally included in an internal email thread titled Redundant Asset Audit. I saw my name on the list right between the fax machine and a guy who hadn't worked there in years. Next to my name were the words, Legacy Employee, Overpaid, Low Risk. I didn't panic. I took a screenshot, saved a backup, and then pretended to be clueless. People who act dumb are often underestimated, and I wanted them to think I was just another forgotten part of the company. Then things got even worse. I had built a crucial relationship with one of our biggest clients, whom I'll call Glassline. Their CFO had my number saved as fixes what your engineers break. I had been the one silently keeping their contract alive for months. But 3 days before their contract renewal, my access to their account was suddenly cut off. I messaged my manager, Rick, a man who wore expensive vests and used corporate jargon like it was a weapon. He quickly hung up on me, claiming to be in back-to-back meetings. A couple of hours later, Donna from HR called me in for a chat. She told me, in the same tone you would use with a misbehaving dog, "You're lucky we tolerate you." I just smiled. And at that moment, I decided to do something that would wipe out their quarterly earnings and turn the company into a business. School, case study on losing millions of dollars in a single day. What Donna didn't know was that I already had a job offer, a 6-figure salary, the ability to work from anywhere, and a boss who actually knew how to code. But the money wasn't the goal. The goal was revenge. And the revenge was what I was going to bring with me. Glassline wasn't the only client I had personally managed. There were 14 others. I knew their needs, their issues, and their frustrations with our slow, bloated software. I had been their secret hero, their emergency contact, and their private therapist when things went wrong. I had saved every email and every message from them, including complaints they didn't dare send to my bosses. When I called each of them, I didn't try to sell them anything. I just listened and asked if they were happy, one by one. They all asked where I was going next. That resignation letter was more of a public announcement of war. And just for fun, I added one more person to the CC list. Rick's wife. I knew Rick had a second Slack account, and it had been logged into my old test server for months. I had all the proof I needed. The first sign of the disaster came at 10:11 a.m. A major client from Colorado, who had a non-disclosure agreement with us, replied to my resignation email with 3 words, "We're moving to no questions, no pleasantries, a declaration." Within an hour, 5 more clients joined in. Their subject lines were like eulogies, saying things like, "Thank you, Todd. Where you go, we go." By noon, Donna's upbeat Slack messages had stopped. She scheduled an all-hands meeting for 3 p.m., then moved it up to 1:30 p.m., and then nothing. The digital silence was so tense you could feel it. Around 12:03 p.m. Rick called me for the first time in months. I put him on speakerphone and let him talk first. Heard about your move, he said. Let's chat man to man. He tried to smooth things over, saying, I know things have been tense. Glassline is saying you've poached their business. I let the silence hang for a moment before I replied calmly, poached. No, I cultivated. You just forgot to water. He tried to make a deal, but I delivered the line I had been waiting to say. You can't unburn a bridge you pissed on. Rick. He hung up. By 2 p.m., a person from our finance department messaged me asking if I had done a specific manual patch for a client last fall. Their out-of-country developers had messed up a quarterly update, and the client was facing a huge tax penalty. I fixed it without getting any credit, but I had documented every single line of code, linking it to my personal files. They were finally seeing the chaos my departure had caused. At 3:15 p.m., there was an emergency meeting. I didn't attend, but my friend Clara from the QA department, who I called my mole, told me what happened. Rick looked terrible, and Donna was red with rage as she realized her authority was slipping away. Someone in the meeting even asked, Are we being sabotaged? Meanwhile, I was at a rooftop bar, drinking expensive bourbon and watching LinkedIn, notifications from CEOs and founders people who had suddenly remembered me. I hadn't even signed with my new company yet. I wanted to watch them suffer first. And suffer they did. But the most dramatic part was still to come. And it involved a USB drive, a forgotten Slack backup, and a private group chat titled Operation Weasel. The USB drive was black, unlabeled, and full of evidence. I had kept it for over a year after I accidentally got full administrative access during a project. I noticed everything they had tried to hide. I had downloaded a copy of a private Slack group and saved it on that USB drive. Operation Weasel was a secret Slack group created by Rick, Donna, and a few VPs. They used it to plan how to get rid of people they considered non-revenue generating rodents. It was a cruel corporate witch trial where they color-coded names, shared salary information, and even used a meme of a guillotine with my name under it. What they didn't know was that the entire Slack export included audio recordings because Donna had enabled voice logs for accessibility. I had recordings of Rick and Donna discussing how to make me look incompetent so I would quit. But I don't quit easily. I document everything. That afternoon, while they were scrambling to fix the mess, I sent a small package with no return address. Inside was the USB drive, and I sent it to the company's legal department. I sent another to a board member and a third to Rick's wife. That night at 6:41 p.m., Clara texted me one word. Boom. The board had called an emergency meeting. Legal was furious, HR was in lockdown, and Rick's Slack profile had literally disappeared mid-sentence. The next morning, the real chaos began. Glassline announced publicly that they were leaving the company and moving to a more agile partner with superior dev alignment, and they tagged me and my new company in the post. The CEO of my new company texted me, Holy hell, let's talk. We did talk. 3 companies offered me senior roles on the spot, but I chose the one with the most money and a strong legal team. They also had a reputation for buying failing companies on the cheap. My plan wasn't just revenge. It was a hostile takeover. By 2:15 p.m. The company I left had lost 6 major clients. Not thinking about leaving, but gone. The board demanded an emergency shareholder meeting. Clara sent me a photo of a crying Donna clutching a folder. They had offered her a severance package to get her to leave. Rick had vanished, too. Word was he was escorted out of the building. I knew it was because of what was on the USB drive. Careless men don't just fall. They disappear. On Monday morning at 9 a.m., I walked back into the office I had just quit. This time, I wasn't an employee. I was a representative of a company that wanted to buy them out. I wore a suit and carried the USB drive in my pocket like a weapon. The receptionist, a new girl, let me in without question, probably thinking I was an investor. She wasn't wrong. The boardroom was a disaster. At the head of the table sat Jeremy, the interim CEO, who used to avoid me in the lunch line. He was sweating as he handed me a folder. Inside was a pitch deck titled How to Save a Dying Brand. The graphs showed millions in losses. Then I revealed my proposed acquisition model. My new employer had been watching my old company for over a year, and all they needed was an insider to show them the weak spots. I was that insider. I'm not here to rescue you, I said calmly. I'm here to take the valuable parts. Jeremy blinked. You're proposing an acquisition? No, I replied. You don't get acquired. You get dismantled. We'll take your best engineers, your good technology, and about 12% of your clients. The rest can rot. A board member asked what I wanted in return. My voice was cold as I laid out my terms. First, you publicly admit that your leadership engaged in unethical practices and sabotage. Second, you write me a glowing departure letter, retroactive to last month, giving me full credit for all the major accounts I managed. And third, you give me the rights to all the code I built. We both know you can't use it without me anyway. I left them to think about it, giving them 72 hours. As I got on the elevator, my phone buzzed. A former client messaged me one word, signed. That was a 6th client to follow me in 4 days. The bloodbath wasn't over. On Wednesday evening, Jeremy called me from a parking garage, his voice shaking. We'll sign, he muttered. But we want a quiet transition. No media, no victory lap on LinkedIn. I was sitting by my hotel pool, drinking whiskey. No media from me, I said, but I can't control what your ex-girlfriend says, or Rick's wife, or the... He went quiet for a moment. Fine, he finally said. You'll get your code, your credit. We'll issue the statement. Just stabilize things. I didn't reply because stability was never the goal. The next morning, the company's press release dropped. It was a weak apology disguised as a thank you note, admitting a failure in leadership and wishing me success. It was all I needed. 2 hours later, my inbox was flooded with offers. Recruiters, journalists, and clients all wanted to know what it would take to work with me. Then came an unexpected message, an anonymous memo. Subject line: You weren't the only target. It included new Slack logs from an active, secret group chat. It was a new group, but the same cruel behavior. And this time, It included names of people who were still employed, including Clara, my mole. They had flagged her as a potential whistleblower and were planning to push her to resign. My hands tightened around my glass. They were still playing their cruel games. I called Clara. She answered on the first ring. "Send me your resume," I said. "You start Monday. Full salary, signing bonus, title upgrade." No interview. She was speechless. "Dead serious," I said. "And tell the others, the ones they tried to bury, tell them I'm building something better. I'm not done pulling people out of that wreckage." It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about building an army. On Friday afternoon, I stood in my new office, not a cubicle, but a real office, watching the final contract come through. That was 12 clients in 2 weeks, all of whom followed me voluntarily. People were sick of being treated like walking invoices and wanted someone who actually fixed problems instead of scheduling meetings. My new coup, Lynn, handed me a manila envelope. "Something you'll want to see," she said. Rick Reese. Inside were screenshots of a new LinkedIn profile under a fake name. He was now a consultant giving advice on how to retain top talent. There was also a registration for a tech conference where he was the keynote speaker. His topic: how to retain top talent in an agile economy. I laughed so hard I almost choked. He wasn't just crawling out of the ruble. He was selling blueprints to the building he had destroyed. Lynn asked if we should let it go. I didn't even have to finish the sentence. Or I thought I could show Miami just what kind of talent Rick retains. The plan was simple. Register a shell company, book a booth directly across from the keynote stage, and prepare a special presentation for our software suite. The presentation would include anonymized audit trails proving exactly who sabotaged what. We also turned the leaked Slack logs into a case study presented as a fictional story about ethics as architecture. Anyone who knew. On Saturday, I flew to Miami. On Sunday, I set up the booth. At the center was a looping video titled, "What Happens When You Underestimate the People Building Your Empire?" It showed lines of code, dissolving contracts, and a single quote from Donna's leaked audio. "He's just lucky we tolerate him." Rick took the stage at 2 p.m. Within minutes, the whispers from our booth drowned out his microphone. By 2:13, someone threw a stress ball at his face. Conference security didn't stop them. I left the conference without a word. This wasn't the end. It was just a preview. The full release was still uploading. On Monday morning, my phone blew up with notifications. A Reddit thread with 40,000 up, titled "Ex-CEO Tries to Keynote After Losing $40 million in Clients, Gets Memmed into Oblivion." The thumbnail was a photo of Rick getting hit by the stress ball. By noon, a tech blog had picked up the story, and by dinner, my face was being photoshopped onto Moses parting the Red Sea, except the sea was made of burnt NDAs and Rick's dumb vests. It should have felt like a complete victory. But life isn't that simple. That evening, Clara called me. Her voice was shaken with purpose. "Remember Clean Slate?" she said. "It goes deeper." I found another drive. They were selling internal data client data to partners. You weren't just collateral, Todd. You were the firewall. When they couldn't manipulate you, they try to erase you. I sat on my balcony, looking at the city I no longer owed anything to. I realized every smug smile and every performance concern was never about my work. It was about control. They were scared of me. So I did what any reasonable person would do after destroying a corrupt company. I wrote a final report, attached everything Clara found, and forwarded it to federal compliance. I blind copied every major client who had left and a few who hadn't yet. Then I closed my laptop. Revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a USB drive in the right envelope. Sometimes it's the system you built so well they never saw you pulling the wires. And sometimes it's the sound of your old employer laying off their last staff members while you sip whiskey in a room paid for by their biggest client. Donna is now selling crystals on Instagram. Rick's keynote is a meme. I hear he's consulting for a startup in Omaha. And me? I run a company where no one has to tolerate anyone. We build, we protect, and we remember. And sometimes, late at night, I play that video with Donna's voice. He's just lucky we tolerate him. Damn right. I was lucky.